thing.
And YouTube, don't forget YouTube.
And
That's
YouTube.
true.
Yeah, YouTube is,
YouTube needs the
YouTube
love.
is
too.
giving it a good try. It's come a long way.
I love
Come
the
along
YouTubes.
It has. Hello, YouTube.
Hello.
Have you learned any Arabic for this show, Sean?
I didn't, other than what we put up in our e-blast.
That's it. That's right. And how do you pronounce what we put up in our e-blast?
I'm gonna guess Marha Takul,
Yeah, right.
which is, what did he say?
What did he say? What did he say?
I thought
imagine how many times that was said.
right.
No.
That's why I thought it would capture some people. Marha Takul,
Yeah.
Takul, Marha Takul. What did he say? It's a good one for tonight. Interpreters. Or terps, and they use that term. They shortened it to terps.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Terps.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Military slang, you've got to always shorten it, make it different.
Yeah. I got to get straight to the point, faster than normal.
That's right.
Alrighty. Well, I have seven, so I will go ahead and start the music.
Let's
All right.
do it.
You hear me?
All right. We can hear you, Khitam. How are you? Hello.
Good.
Good
Hi,
to
everyone.
see you.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Generation 9/11. It's so good to see you all. I'm your host, Sean Hall, the Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. With me, as always, is Todd DiPastino. Todd, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Very well. Thank you, Sean.
Of course. And Ellie DiPastino, no relation.
Total coincidence.
Total. Ellie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited for tonight's program to talk with two interpreters who are now living in the U.S. Tonight about their experiences working with the armed forces and then coming over to the United States. We're going to get to Khitam and Ehab very shortly. We have a couple little bits of announcements before we do, and I'm going to hand it over to Todd for what we got coming up with VBC.
Yes, and I do want to let everybody know that because of Women's History Month, we're going to be dedicating our program on Monday, March 8th. So Monday night, BBC Happy Hour, Women in the Military. And so we're going to have Major General Jan Edmonds join us. And she's retired after 30 years of service in the Army, and several other women who have served in the military. So I want to let you know that if you are a woman who has served in the military, Ashley, Julia, we would love for you to join us if you're available, and if you know somebody a woman who has served in the military, would love to have them join us. So we're just going to have an open conversation with women who served in the military, get their stories. That's Monday night, March 8th, 7 p.m. VBC Happy Hour. And that leads me to Andrew and Ashley Kauto. How are you guys doing? They are beaming in from Okinawa. What time is it in Okinawa?
It is 9 o'clock in the morning on Friday, the 5th of March.
Wow.
9 o'clock. So it's the 5th of March, 9 o'clock in the morning. And that is Ashley and Andrew. And Ashley is the daughter of Carl Curtis, who's with us here. Carl, there you are. Hello, Carl. Ashley and Andrew are also Marines. I have some wonderful pictures of them. And, Ashley and Andrew, I know you're in quarantine now, correct?
Yes, Andrew recently got home from a extended TAD, and our policies here are if you travel anywhere outside of mainland Japan, upon your return, you have to quarantine for 14 days. And if you do it, you have the option of doing it in the barracks, but since he was home in that way, the boys and I wouldn't have to quarantine. But since he was gone for so long, he did it at home
Yeah.
So we all have to quarantine
So
for
you
14
all
days.
have to quarantine. And what day are you into the quarantine?
Day 6?
Five.
5? 5. Day 5.
Oh,
I say that's how we kind of all feel. 6, 5, or,
I know.
378.
But what I'm getting at, Ashley, is if you could join us this Monday night
Yes.
on March 8th here, it would be March 9th there
9th. Yep.
in the morning. So it would be Tuesday morning for you. If you could join us, would love to have you join us. It'd be great to have a young, woman talk about being a Marine. As you can see, we have some Marines here with us, including from World War II on down. So I think people would just love to get an update about, what's going on in the Marine Corps and what you and your husband have been doing in the service.
Could I ask a question? Andrew, why are you in that same room? You need to be in another room. Matter of fact, maybe even down in the basement or something like that.
There is no basement. It's a 1,200 square foot apartment.
Well, at least at the far end of it. Ashley, throw them out.
How do you like Okinawa?
It's not bad. Unfortunately, we haven't got to experience much. We got here January 10th of last year, and everything started shutting down in March. So we've kind of been in and out of stages where we're not allowed to do anything. It just opened up yesterday. We're now allowed to, for the first time in 7 months, be able to eat inside of a restaurant.
Oh my God.
Until this,
Wow.
yeah, we were allowed to go takeout or drive-throughs, but we're not allowed to sit in restaurants, and they just changed that yesterday. So we haven't got to enjoy too much. Pretty much the malls, and we got to do a couple waterfall hikes, but that's about it.
Okay, and
So-
I'm gonna share a very quick picture before I throw it back to Shauna, because I know we have this wonderful program to get to. But here is this a proud family of Marines or what? Look at all those stripes, first of
Wow.
all, and hash marks. And then look at those medals on Carl's. Is that called a jacket in the Marine Corps?
It's called a blouse.
It's called a blouse, of course. A blouse. Look at that is just, I love that picture. You should be a very proud family. I know Carl's a very proud father. So Ashley, great. Would love to see you Monday night. And thank you guys for joining us tonight on
Absolutely. Thank you.
9/11. Terrific. Carl, thank you for making that connection.
See, it's like a family program here.
Yeah.
We bring all the families together. We should be eating or something. Having popcorn together. Super excited again for tonight, everyone. And also, we have a new episode of The Scuttlebutt that just went live on Monday. I was joined by Catherine Guion, who is a correspondent, a newscaster over in Ohio, Ryan All, as always, and Evan Mulgrave, who was the filmmaker director of our They Left as Brothers. He joined us also to talk about post 9/11 war movies. We figured that we would sort of piggyback on the World War II war movies that we were doing in our main programming and talk a bit about the newer movies that have come out about the post 9/11 conflicts. We get into it about several of them, and Ryan definitely, it's worth a listen to him talk about how inaccurate the Hurt Locker is, and despite how much I loved it, it's kind of funny. So hopefully you guys pop over to our website, veteransbreakfastclub.org, to check out the video there. And next week we'll have a special bonus video on the Scuttlebutt of Ryan breaking down the recent 10th Mountain Shoot House training fail. If you've not heard about it, that was a viral video of a training in a shoot house that is supposedly really bad. So Ryan broke down that video for us, and we're gonna let Ellie do her editing magic, and we'll get to see that video next Monday. I also wanted to spend some time tonight. If anybody has any COVID updates, anybody have anything that's been they've run across at the VA or anything that they'd like to update us on before we continue? All good? Awesome. Great. Well, Khitam, welcome to Generation 9/11. Thank you so much for joining us. And you're joining us from DC, is that correct?
Virginia, just across the street from DC.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I know we had connected. We had talked a bit earlier this week, and thank you so much for coming on tonight. I'm very interested to hear your story of in Iraq, becoming an interpreter with the armed forces, and sort of how you came over. Right now, you run a nonprofit. You co-authored a book when you came over to the States. There's a lot to get to in your story, and we want to also save time at the end for people to ask you any questions. But I figured we would just dive right in and start with probably the most obvious question, and that is, how did you end up becoming an interpreter with the U.S.?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sean. And it's really my pleasure to be among you all. And it's an honor to share just a little bit of my story with you all. And thank you for being interested to hear my story. Sean, do you mind if I shared, can you give me the option to share the screen?
Of course.
Yeah, you should be able to share now.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Oops.
Oh, these are great.
Sorry.
I noticed I didn't have any pictures with you, Tom, so I'm so happy that you brought these.
Thank you. So I will just, as I said, I'll probably just share a little bit of my journey, which from Iraq to US, which for me it's considered a journey of countless words and countless stories. So I'll try to keep it around the first chapter, around the cover of the story, let's say. This is actually I'll fly you back in memories. I'll take you back in my memories to 2003, and this was April 2003. And this is actually the Republican Palace in Baghdad. It's somehow considered the main palace for Saddam Hussein at that time. And driving around Baghdad prior April 2003, we kind of like, or at least I'll speak about myself and probably the generation I'm representing, and a variety of youth who lived and the community who lived in Baghdad and probably across Iraq, close to the presidential palaces. We used to drive with automated blinders. We used to drive without looking at the palace, because it was obvious, the cameras were everywhere, and we had this perception like if we looked for innocent reason, we might be arrested for no reason. So we used to drive by without even looking at that forbidden building and buildings around Baghdad and around Iraq. My first time entering this palace was around late May 2003. Now you guys are all related to what does it mean to be quarantined, but at that time, we Iraqis, we used to be quarantined for conflict and war reasons. So the quarantine has a different story in the Iraqi life. So we were somehow caged in our houses because it's the war being declared, and the military conflict and sirens everywhere, and bombs, the sound of the bombs on you hear it by the minute, if not by every 5 seconds or so. So we were quarantined somehow in our houses because we're not allowed. I mean, basically, civilians are not encouraged to go out except for like emergency reasons and There was no curfew, but it's for safety measures. These are the announcement we got from the state at that time. So everyone, the default option for all Iraqi families, civilians, is to stay home, stay where you are as long as you're safe.
Did you feel safe in quarantine?
The military quarantine, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I can't say it's safe because safe has no space around, you know, the sounds of bombs and sirens and all those, you know, military planes moving around and helicopters, you know, in the space, and plus the bomb sounds from the Iraqi military trying to defend the city. So I don't think my mind could even relate to this word. Now I'm talking about my memories. It's hard to really relate to what safe means, but I could say being safe for us, being one piece as a human being. You don't see blood in your bedroom or in your house. You see your family in one piece. Everyone is able to breathe on daily basis, and regardless if you are able to eat or drink, or these are something like really secondary, as long as you're one piece and you are able to maintain your breath. Probably that I would interpret, that's how I would interpret feeling safe, how it sounds, living in a war zone.
If I hope it's not rude to ask how old you were in 2003, like when you were experiencing the quarantine.
Well, I thought women are not to be asked this question in the U.S.
That's why I said I'm just trying to get
just kidding.
Yeah, okay.
Just kidding. Well, I was just graduated from college. I believe I was around 20 years old at that time, 20 years, 21. So we were quarantined for like quite some time. We didn't leave the house. Plus, we heard a lot of rumors, like, you know, Americans, they will come and soldiers will rape every woman. Of course, these are part of these rumors being instigated by the Ba'ath parties, so they could really maintain control of the city. So we heard a lot of rumors. One of them, like Saddam is, you know, moving around the streets, and he's deploying his special forces who are prepared to just kill every civilian who will interact with American or will try to make any connection with any stranger who are not Iraqi in the street. I mean, just for the rumors, we could really author a full volume, not just one book. So we stayed home for quite some times, and it was even we were even barely opening the main gate of the house. We used to open. I mean, my mom, she was handling that that part of the daily life, providing food or sharing food actually with our neighbors, or trying to beg the water tap to have some clean water for drinking, because electricity and drinkable water were coming in and out like on schedule and randomly during the day. So we have to make some shifts to really maintain the water and for the family, as well as to support neighbors where we could. So fast forward in late May, and the news were providing us with nothing. And this is actually one of the gates inside the Republican Palace. It's called Al-Quds Gate. And I'll tell you the story how I first saw this gate in my life ever. In April 9th, 2003, that's what Arab media outlets were showing on TV. Of course, we don't have any access to TV by April 9th, but we were managing to get some news broadcasted through the radio. And we were barely having some like really recognizable news from Reuters or the BBC, because there were the government and the intelligence, they tried to mess up the radio system all the time. So we were getting bits and pieces as much as we could, but apparently that's what the Abu Dhabi satellite TV showed, and that's what we heard in the radio. Like Saddam is actually going out and he's meeting the public in downtown Baghdad, and everything is under control. And the guy next to Saddam with the tie, that's his son Qusay. And he was the head of the intelligence division in Iraq. So we were like, okay, we don't know what to believe. We heard people approaching our neighborhood who witnessed part of the Baghdad airport battle, and they shared some of the news, like, no, everyone is really killed in that battle, and we just, withdraw. And so it was so hard to listen to whom and to believe whom. So the safest decision for our family was to, and most of our abandoned neighborhood, because most people left Baghdad, and they left at the border village, and they tried to relocate there, at least just to maintain their safety or their semi-normal life, having good access to food in rural areas and in farming communities. But my mother at that time, she was like, she said, like, if we're gonna die, so I would rather to have our house to be our grave instead of being scattered on the road. So we respected her decision, and I don't think myself, I wasn't in a status to be, able to decide on anything, because it was, everything happened all of a sudden. We kept hearing from the news, like, things under control, and these are just, diplomatic tension between Iraq and US. Of course, we were completely in isolated bubble. We don't know the reality. The only reality we were hearing, well, reality at the time, is the state reality, what they were sharing with us. So these are the image that we were envisioning, hearing and listening the news from the radio, but this was the reality in Baghdad. Downtown, April 9, 2003. American troops were almost controlling the downtown in Iraq, in Baghdad. And this bridge is just 20 minutes away from my house driving.
That was what I was going to ask. And you lived in Baghdad your whole life at that point?
Yeah, so I experienced Iraqi-Iran war, Iraqi-Kuwaiti war, and the latest war, which is also known as the U.S. invasion to Iraq in 2003. So I'm a kid who was born and raised and grew in a war zone.
Was there a different feeling in each one of those conflicts inside Iraq?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, 8 years of my early childhood, I probably heard the siren twice, and it was scary enough to hold it like up to this moment. When I recall it, I still shake. My body is still shaking. But at least we didn't witness much of the conflict, military conflict inside Baghdad, except one time when Iran attacked primary school, elementary school, and that was like a shocking trauma for the whole country, and especially for the community in Baghdad, because it's like the war is right next door, and it's attacking a school, not any military base, not any residential base. It was an attack to innocent kids in a very normal school day.
Yeah.
So it was completely normal, although it was 8 years, but not much felt, at least in Baghdad. I'm sure, like in Basra, South Iraq, many communities, their experience is completely different because they lived the war, and it was a street war between the Iraqi army and Iranians, like approaching some of the borders, and the back and forth of the battle, especially in Basra, which is the very far southern city of Iraq. Of course, in 1991, it was like a horror movie for me. I was fifth grade at that time, and it was a real horror movie. I recall I barely slept during that. It was, I believe it was it was 2 weeks or so of war, but it was hell of a war. I recall I barely slept 3 hours during the night or so, and I held tight to my mother because the sound of the bombs and the shaking of the doors and slam of windows was horrible. For me to experience as a child at that time. And we were smelling on daily basis. I used to smell we call it the smell of the war, of the attack, of the bombs. It was reaching us. And I remember one time I was in a bus. We were going to my sister's house because she just had a baby before the war, a couple of months, and my mom used to go back and forth there to take care of her and her baby. And on the road, we were just as we approach a military base. The attack happened, and I saw the base scattered in the sky into small pieces, like literally as big as this. So, but it was a miracle. I remember everyone in the bus started, praying and crying, and I didn't know what happened because of the sound. Yeah. I felt like everything paused for a minute, but I still see. I was still able to see the lip, signs of the people praying, and then kind of like it's like. The scene came back to me, and my mom was holding me so tight I could barely breathe. Right. That was my horrible experience in 1991. And so fast forward to 2003. We didn't know whom to believe, what's going on in Baghdad, and my mother said, like, after we heard, the fall of the regime, my mother was like, we just can't believe anyone. So let's remain calm, let's stay home until things, unfold, and we see, hopefully we will be able to connect with the world, and we get a better understanding. And I remember my elder brother, he used to have a night shift, because I remember after around 2 a.m., the signal of the radio were better. So he tried to capture whatever he could, so he could share in the morning with everyone on the breakfast, as well as the remaining individuals of our neighbors. I remember my neighborhood, we and like only 2 families remained in full. My family and our neighbor next to us, who were 3 senior women. Everyone else, they had just 1 person and mainly 1 man to guard the house. So it was a completely different story. Yeah. So fast forward to late May 2003. I lost my job. I was a contractor for the Ministry of Irrigation in Iraq prior to the war, and like a personal service contractor. So after the fall of the regime, there was no state, basically.
Can I ask if there were only certain jobs that women could do before the fall of the regime?
Oh, no.
Okay.
We were doing everything. Basically, women from 1980 in Iraq, they were actually running the country. Because most men were at the front lines with Iran and at the battlefield.
Oh,
but most women actually were building. And my memories during the 80s and prior invading Kuwait by Saddam, you could feel prosperity status in Iraq. Bridges were developing, the economy were booming, and women were doing all sorts of jobs you could imagine and you cannot imagine. So nothing was, not privileged or excluded for women, even in the military. They were doctors, engineers, and brilliant, brain masters in the military as well. So my story with how I joined the U.S. Troops in Iraq, it was late May 2003. I lost my job, and my sister was a grad student. And in Iraq, during Saddam's regime, the system was, if you are a grad student, one of the state agencies will adopt your research. So they will cover your tuition, they will cover your research, your stipends. And because basically they will invest in your research, and they will adopt the findings of your research. So she wanted to know what will happen with her, because she was halfway in her master's program, and she's a civil engineer. So she wanted to know what's going on. Should she resume, or it's gone? It's a dream that, gone with the wind.
Yeah.
So at that time, Jay Garner was the one in charge of commanding the reconstruction portfolio and basically the.
Oop. Sorry, we had you muted there for just a second.
Okay.
So, I don't know why that. I don't know if we're experiencing a little technical difficulty. Let's see if that works.
If you click on the space of the keyboard, it will mute you. So you have to.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't touched anything on site.
No, it's you, Sean, not.
I'll make sure. Hands up. Oh.
No, I'm not saying you did, but I think. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm trying to say that if that's the case.
That is possible. Zoom, sometimes Zoom,
Yeah.
Technology. Thank you, Ehab. And thank you for joining us, Ehab. We're going to get to your story soon after we talk with Khitam. I'm looking forward to that. But Khitam, who was in charge again? It was the first person that was in charge of the rebuild, right? Garner. Okay.
Garner. Yeah. So we heard in the news, he was calling for the police to rejoin, and he tried to reconstruct and also restructure the state at that time. So it was late May, so it's almost almost like 3 months of unemployment and quarantine, and we haven't seen the street. But she was under the pressure of some deadlines, and she needed an answer. So I was like, okay, let's go and check on your the agency that is sponsoring your research. So we went there, and the agency was at the gate of the convention center at that time, and it was the agency belonged to. It was one of the facilities of the Ministry of Industry. So we went there. We arrived there, and so the journey from my house to that location was like someone coming from different age. from different era. The streets were not the same. The movement wasn't the same. People, the attitude, the behaviors of people out in the street were stress and anxiety, filled of stress, anxiety, fears, and question marks everywhere.
Yeah.
We don't know what was going on. It was our first time ever going out. I still remember my body was reacting to the sunlight differently, to the exposure of the environment differently. So we made it there, and there was like a massive gathering of people, all a variety of demographic, diverse demography. We had senior people, we had young people, women, men, from all backgrounds, and they were divided into groups, and some were so angry, some were just, watching the situation with gazillions of question marks. They couldn't even ask a question, and we were one of them. We tried to process all this information through that journey at the same time, all together.
How many people would you say were there?
Around, if I'm not exaggerating, 150 plus, 130 plus, around that,
Okay.
in one spot.
Yeah.
So there were two American soldiers who tried to deal with the crowd, and they tried to apply some of the anger management techniques or crowd management techniques, and they tried to calm people. And my sister, she panicked when she saw the American soldiers for the first time, and she literally she started shaking, and she couldn't breathe properly, and she couldn't talk. And I was like, okay, let me handle this. Like younger, normally they have more curiosity, and they could sometimes step in or jump to take initiatives easier than I was,
The older siblings are more cautious.
Exactly.
The younger ones. Yeah.
I was in a position to take initiative more than my sister, because
Yeah.
I cannot generalize my perception on everyone. So I stepped in, and I tried to ask him, how can we get into the facility, and if there was anyone that we could talk to. So the first thing, he wasn't even hearing me. So he was like, "Are you here to enroll as interpreter?" And I was like, "What? Okay, I just graduated from College of Education, English Literature." So I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm here for that reason." So I was, "Okay, you're in the wrong gate. You need to go to that gate." I was like, and how should I approach the process? What should I do? He was like, "Take this card, and just go to that gate and tell them I'm here for the interview for the interpreters, and they will take care of everything else." I was like, okay. And my sister was dying from fears. She was like, she couldn't even talk. And I was like, she was like, "What? Where are you going? Do you want to kill us? Are you going?" I was like, "Yes, they do have guns, girl, but calm down. They're not pointing it against anyone. Don't you see? They're talking to everyone just like us. So why would we fear, Right. So I convinced her one way or another, and we went to the other gate. And that was my first time ever seeing this gate. So I entered the gate. There was another soldier who pointed me to the bus stop, and I went there. And there was a scheduled bus, and this was also something strange. Well, I expected everything to be organized and scheduled inside the presidential palace, but with the military, it's kind of like a bit of a surprise for me.
I'm sure a lot of them were probably also trying to process all of that at the same time as well. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So I entered the gate, and it was complete different world for me. I had mixed feelings. Till now, I don't know how to explain it. But we had this image of that dictator. We had this image of this place that is forbidden even to think, to turn your head when you're driving in a taxi or in a bus, going back and forth to your house. And now I'm inside.
Mm-hmm.
And all those images of the luxurious, palace between, well, whether it's going to be a Cinderella type of palace, or what does it mean to have a dictator built palace and residential palace? What does, all those questions were floating in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But the luxurious image in my brain was covered with dust because of the war, and it was spring at that time, and we started with the climate change, like in Baghdad we started getting dust storms.
Mm-hmm.
So is this the reality? Is this the reality of the status of fears that we lived with for all that time, at least 15 years almost of my life? I was raised and exposed to status of fear.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at the plants, the trees over there. You could feel it had good care and luxurious care, but it was, covered with dust.
Where was the palace? Was that area also victim of a lot of theft? Like were things bashed in, windows broken, things like that? Was it picked over? Or is it really just covered in sort of dirt and dust?
Not that location, other locations. Okay. Because this location was the main location for the CPA, the Coalition Provincial Authority at that time. Mm-hmm. And it's also known as the Green Zone.
Okay.
At that time, but other palaces got affected on the other direction of Baghdad. Mm-hmm. But definitely there was some scenes of conflict, probably internal conflict. I don't know, maybe when the troops got in, definitely, I mean, the streets and the infrastructure is not meant for, like heavy military vehicles. So you could also see some signs of, of the military conflict here and there. Mm-hmm. So I made it to the building, and then the driver pointed like, okay, here is your bus stop. Here's your drop-off point. And I was like, okay. I went there. I hop off the bus. Nobody was there. I mean, life was kind of like super normal there. No one was there. No checkpoints. Nobody was asking for my ID. So it was like smooth drive, just just similar to the downtown before April 9th. I arrived there, and there were two buildings. To my right, there was the building in charge of reconstructing Iraq, where they were issuing the multi-millions contracts. Mm-hmm. And to my left, there was the office of recruiting interpreters and enrolling interpreters. Belongs to, well, it's called Titan office. Mm-hmm. I should have gone to the to the left building. They have best salaries than the right buildings than the left one. Anyway, so I was curious just to see what's going on. What do they mean by enrolling interpreters? So I entered the center there. It was fancy building, but not as fancy as the actual palace. I think it was probably a facility belonged to the guards or something. Yet it's fancy, or administration, whatever. So there were like a couple of people, like a pair of soldier and civilian, and soldier and civilian, and there was a desk there registering names. And I was like, okay, is this the place called Titan or Titanic? I don't know, what is it? They were like, oh yeah, it's Titan. Okay. Is here where interpreter being enrolled? And they were like, oh yeah, you're here for this. Do you have any? I was like, oh yeah, you're looking for this card? They were like, yes. So they registered me, and they gave me, they scheduled me for an interview. in April, in June 4th. So I was looking at people, soldiers were talking, having a conversation. I didn't know at that time this was the interview.
Oh, it had started.
Yeah, because some people already enrolled.
Okay.
But I had an interview after 2 weeks of time frame. So I took my interview schedule and I went out, and I was so curious just to see the environment. I wanted to move around, and of course my sister almost had a heart attack. And she was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, I just want to see the place. Nobody's here. Like literally nobody's here. And she was like, no, let's go. Let's ride a bus and go back. I really can't. I'm so nervous. And I was like, okay, let's just go home.
Yeah.
So
do you wish you had talked her into just a little further?
I don't think I missed much, because later on, that was meeting that guy and taking a step and taking the initiative and to accept the opportunity, open opportunity for me. And I wasn't sure what I was doing, honestly. I was curious to see what was inside those walls.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even in my mind that I would pursue this job opportunity. So I took the piece of paper and I went back home with so much mixed feelings and memories and image and between fake image and reality, so many questions. And that's how I started working with the military.
What did your parents think of you got back and it was like you were supposed to just go check out the building and suddenly you have a job working with the
So my father passed away when I was in college, so only my mother. So I told them about the story. The youngest in the family, they're talkers. Normally, they don't stop talking. And of course, my sister was recovering and trying to control her heartbeat still, and would all curse curse words that I did expose her to that experience. And I didn't tell them about, enrolling for that job, because I wasn't thinking about it. But I told them about, what's behind those high walls. And my mom was like, she kept silent. I believe she had more than my mixed feelings going on in her, and especially she was in a mourning period because she just lost her brother who got killed in North Iraq, in Kirkuk specifically. Of course, part of the liberation or the military operations that was going on, and she had just so much on her shoulder. And so much going on in the family that I wasn't even in the mindset to think about pursuing this as a career,
right.
Or working with internationals even. My story, actually, that was the turning point of my life. But my actual new life started June 4th. When I, prior June 4th, I think 2 days prior the interview, probably it was June 2nd, when I informed my mother and my elder brother that I'm willing to pursue this and just to give it a try, to see if I'm able to handle what enrolling in that position means and what does it entail. Yeah. And I grew up in a very open-minded family. Who support women career and individual career in any direction, as long as you could take your full responsibility and you could still be a great citizen. That's their standard for us. It's not to be good citizen, but to be great citizen. So, and they said, like, we will respect your decision, give it a try, and if you want to pursue that, we will respect your decision and support you. So I went to the interview, and there when my story started. And I just wanted to show you this photo from 2003. As you see, The American troops were driving in the streets, just normally side by side with the Iraqi community. Not much of tension. We use ISO military soldiers exchanging food and stepping into community houses and having lunch and testing Iraqi dishes. And some people, they try to practice English or try to learn some words. I've seen soldiers are playing with kids soccer in the street, putting down their weapons, and so life was semi-normal until Bremer came in and the story changed completely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll pause here in case you have a question. I think I've dumped so much information.
I think we should open it up to some questions.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for Khitam. I muted you. Do you know what
Was it on purpose though? Was I saying something inappropriate?
It was so, I got a call. I panicked. I got a call from a cousin that it was bad news about a family member.
Oh,
and
I'm sorry.
I wanted to turn off the sound on my computer, and instead I muted you, and I felt so bad.
Well,
everyone's looking around.
I hope your family are doing well.
They're okay.
That's good.
I think it's, and so I have to say I missed a part of what you said, but I'm so interested in that transition from Gardner to Paul Bremer. People will remember that. I certainly remember that transition, and I don't know if you spoke to it in any detail, or if people have questions about that, or if that's something that you're going to get in. Okay, that's something that you're going to get. Well, let's open it up to questions that people have.
Sure.
Yeah, where did the Bremer come from? I mean, where did they find this guy? Seriously.
So why don't you, do people remember Paul Bremer? Do people remember him?
I do not. Ask, is there anyone forget Paul Bremer?
Well, we Americans have very short memories, Khitam.
Oh, Iraqis, I don't think Iraqis are.
We have, exactly. We have very short memories, and that to some people that might as well have been, the Vietnam War. I mean, it just, so. Well,
that's a bliss.
But I certainly remember that. Where did Bremer come from? I wish I don't remember that. But Bob Miswell, were you going to say something? Or George Kniss, do you remember Bremer?
Hey, Todd, I think they just looked in the hat. They flipped it, they pulled, they said, Paul Bremer right there.
No, he had some foreign policy experience.
Yes.
And was a Republican Party strong supporter, and he was a political appointee. And he was pulled out as a second level guy to fill in for the guy who got into trouble before him. And Bremer seemed partially competent, and he got along with the Bush administration.
Yes.
And so he had some life in him.
Right.
That's correct. He was appointed by the Bush administration. That's correct.
Exactly.
And I probably shouldn't talk about this because all I have is like these memories of I remember Gardner seemed like a little bit out of his element, or it was a little bit in over his head. Bremer had an appearance of much more competence, but I just remember the devastating thing was, breaking up the army, the Iraqi army. That was a catastrophe.
Yeah, and instigating sectarian conflict in Iraq. That was his second major achievement, I would say, and that cost the U.S. a lot more than we could have imagined. I believe the U.S. is still living with
that decision.
Impact, exactly. Sorry.
Can I inject one thing here? Bremer was not at the level that he would make vast strategic policy like that. He was the front guy for the Bush administration. Those particular policies were made by Cheney and company. Because remember, Vice President Cheney was deep into running the day-to-day affairs. He was a former Secretary of Defense, and he was deep into policy. And he is known as the guy who made the strategic policy decisions. It was a cover for Bush, and really Bremer was kind of the front fall guy, sort of, for the policy. That's what I know, anyway.
I don't think I could disagree with you. I don't think I could disagree with you, but unfortunately, Bremer was like, as you said, he was the cover, he was the face for the U.S. Administration in Iraq, and for the U.S. as a country, not just in Iraq, in the Middle East. I would say like that was the size of the position he was managing at that time. Unfortunately.
Right. They managed the execution of the war effort well, but then when they brought in the after conflict pacification, as we used to call it in Vietnam, they failed. They really failed, and they created more problems for the military to secure the place and make progress, and especially in strategic policy with the future of Iraq and handling it to a government that was competent, that was secure, and that was that had the ability to work out their own internal problems.
Tom, let me go in a little different direction. What was the impression, and you may have addressed this already, what exposure did you have to American culture before 2003? What was your impression of Americans before 2003?
The movie actions, action movies, and Titanic on the top of the list. At least for my generation, that's how we relate to the American society, and the Bodyguard movie, I would say. So basically, through the lens of Hollywood, honestly, that's the exposure we were getting. Other than that, the political exposure was sick and poisoned, and I believe the American society caught in the middle. And just like probably us as Iraqis, we're caught in the middle afterward. But I mean, the messages we were getting in schools, in college, is cursing the Bush administration, cursing Bush himself, both the father and the son. To the extent, I believe that the situation between the Bush family and Saddam became too personal. That's just me talking, reflecting on my perception of the situation. But yeah, I would say a Hollywood lens. That's the only connection we had about the U.S. society.
You also, Ehab?
What is it about my experience?
Yeah, well, what did you think of Americans before 2003?
I mean, I was young, and unlike Khitam, my family is like the way she spoke. She's like all into school, like not like that. I was the first one in my family goes to college and gets education. So mine was movies. Yeah, the movies was big parts. The cartoons, Tom and Jerry is a big thing in my childhood. Also the American cars, for sure. I'm an old fan of American cars. My father, my family had a garage. We only fixed American cars. There's West Baghdad, Northwest Baghdad. There is this industrial kind of highway. It specialized in fixing, rebuilding American cars, and we had shop there. So I grew up there and on the cars. So I always liked the cars and all that stuff. But we all get this propaganda on the TV, but it wasn't really if you're smart enough, you would know it's not really true about America and Americans. Also, the propaganda was more about the presidents of the United States, not the like, you know, and Saddam, like TV, like propaganda, it wasn't directed toward American people because, you know, Americans, like American movies and things like that was very popular in Iraq, but it was more like, I would agree that it was too personal, sounded like between Saddam and the, you know, Bush, but then the Clinton as well followed and so forth. You know, I personally thought it was interesting to see Americans. I mean, I was a kid, I wasn't scared of anything. I just wanted to see the first, you know, convoy of tanks and everything. That was my intentions when I was little. So.
If I may add to my perception of the American, also the high quality furniture that I've seen in my house, my family houses, they're like really durable furnitures and very elegant. And that's another memory. And the third memory and perception, as I said, the American hostages that I've seen on TV, I believe during the Iraqi-Kuwaiti war. But other than that, the only way we could relate to the Americans is through the products we used to have during the 80s and Hollywood lens. That's the only I remember we used to ask this question: what is the opinion of the American society of the sanctions, the economic sanctions against Iraq? Do they accept that their kids are starving? Do they accept that they have money, but there's no medicine at the hospitals? I can't tell you how many people and how many individuals that I've lost in my family due to lack of medicine. Panadol, imagine Tylenol could have solved the problem. But it is what it is. And I think the war made us adaptive, and we just accept fate for what it is. We have Iraqi says, if something catastrophic happened, nobody asks why, because the reason is already there, because we're Iraqis.
Wow.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not a fan of sanctions because like you see, I mean, like North Korea, for example, you have people starving, but the dear leader is enjoying his 48 waistband. So, you know, that's it.
It only ends up hurting the people.
Yeah, like I don't think the sanctions would work. You know, it didn't do anything to North Korea. What it is, it made the regime more brutal, and probably what's going on in Iran as well, where they're just going to hang too much and they're just going to kill anyone in front of them. They're going to be more brutal. They're going to be fed well, and the people are going to suffer. So, you know, I would much rather if they directly attack or something, attack whoever that guy they want to do.
Ehab, stop. If I may add or reflect on what Ehab just said, I think the sanctions is the worst technique used to provide gifts for dictator regimes, more reasons to instigate enemies and to build enemy empires that will live for long time, who have hatred perceptions against Americans. They poison people brain with all sort of propaganda and poisoned perceptions. They're raising generations on those false perceptions. So if I would ask one thing from every American around the globe is to stand against economic sanctions. It's worse than war itself. I'm not saying war is not worse, but I'm saying it's equal to war. However, the consequences is way deeper and longer than we could all imagine.
Can I ask one thing?
Please, sir.
I generally agree that the sanctions have failed. The U.S. has, in the wide swath of sanctions we've done with Iran today with other countries. Cuba is a fine example of the past. But to give credit to the US and the international community is that they've focused it now to individual sanctions of leadership, military and civilian leadership. And it seems to be a little more effective, and it seems to be more precise in trying to get to the heart of those decision makers instead of the general populace. What do you think about that? Both of you. Hello?
Yeah, I don't think those would work as well, because like the people who the hold the power and the regimes like that, they're not really gonna get affected by, if you put a sanction on them, they can't trade stock. They're not doing that anyway. Instead, they sell drugs, they smuggle human trafficking, all that stuff. So that stuff's already illegal. I mean, that's my opinion.
Does that include like travel sanctions and transportation of goods and services and things like that? Because it's not just money and accounts that are held in Western banks. It's also their physical disposition to travel like they are used to. And it puts a clamp on that they can go, especially when it's an international sanction and not just the US.
Do they travel a lot? Do they go to the...
They certainly do.
I mean, so if you're talking a fair example, the Soleimani was traveling all over the Middle East. It didn't really...
Sanctions didn't necessarily affect him.
Yeah, probably wasn't an international sanction.
He might not go to Hawaii at a resort over there, but he can still go to Syria. I mean, he never goes there anyway,
Yeah.
This brings up a really, really interesting point. I do want to get back to the stories here because I think we could dive down a deep rabbit hole on the sanctions. But you bring up a very good point that I hadn't thought of about the sanctions, is that they can be to the level of war. And thank you for helping me to realize that. I want to get back to Khitam. Things changed for you whenever the gentleman took over. And what I'd like to get to is with our time here, right before we get to Ehab's story, is when you came over to the U.S., you co-authored a book, speaking their voices.
Their piece.
Speaking their piece. Thank you. And you started a nonprofit. And I wanted to jump to that and see if you could talk to us about the book. We're going to put a link to it here in our chat, and also speak to us about what your organization is and why you started it.
Thank you, Sean. So for the book is actually, it belongs to the United States Institute of Peace, a very well-respected organization in Washington, D.C. that works on conflict management and conflict resolution around the world. And that book, the purpose of it was similar to what you're doing, but to collect stories from citizens from all backgrounds. Like for the chapter of Iraq, I met widows who've been forced to marry members of Al-Qaeda. I interviewed widows to a place called the Triangle of Death. If any military friend with us here who served in Iraq would know what I'm talking about and what I'm referring to as the Triangle of Death. It's southern Baghdad, where Iraqis and American troops got killed by the second. So I met with people there. I met with people from all over Iraq to speak their piece, to reflect on the war and what does it mean, the term rule of law for them. and what would be their message to policymakers and to the global community around the world, because the book contained several countries, Bosnia, Libya, Iraq, and others, conflict zones. And we wanted to collect the author, Colette Trash. She wanted to collect the stories and reflections from ordinary people who has nothing to do with policy making, whose administration in different places of the world proclaiming that they're serving those people. So she wanted to really open up the space for those people to reflect on their perceptions and understanding and their dreams, where they want to see and how they want to see rule of law. After coming to permanently to my adopted country, United States, and having my citizenship, and I felt like it wasn't a coincidence that I've met that soldier who told me about the enrollment as interpreter. By the way, I was contracted as interpreter, but I actually never worked as interpreter. I was I worked in the Iraqi Assistance Center, a humanitarian center established by the Civil Affairs, by the military, in the convention center in the heart of Baghdad, to provide all sorts of services. And I was in charge of the compensation, where the military were compensating civilians who got affected by the military operations, and they got property damage or physical damage. And I also was the head of the detention center, where I managed the database for prisoners under the custody of the U.S. military. So yes, we the company were hiring people as interpreters, but they were actually assigned to all sort of complicated and essential positions. So my responsibilities started growing and growing by time, and being Iraqi, having all these let's say opportunities, I decided and that I felt like the responsibility is growing and I need to take further steps. And being in my adopted country and being Iraqi American, I don't think I could be proud enough, but that comes with a package of a whole level of responsibility. So I co-founded a nonprofit called Global Judur Foundation. Do you have it on the screenshot by any chance? No?
This Global Judur Foundation.
Global Judur Foundation. Yes. Do you have it now?
1 second. I'll have it up.
I shared screen.
Yes, there.
Okay. So I co-founded this foundation. It's a nonprofit. The main focus of it is to promote durable peace through social reintegration and sustainable development. Through our programs, and the team and the advisory team that we have, we're really using a variety of wisdom, and among which is the military wisdom is present. And I worked with the military and I learned a lot. I learned how they're approaching human life. And I learned a lot from them. So I felt like I'm in a better position and empowered to really lead the path for a durable stability. And me and everyone in Judur Global Judur Foundation, we're working day and night to ensure social reintegration are effectively implemented in conflict and post-conflict zones. And of course, Iraq is on the geographic, top geographic priority for us. And my personal mission through Judur is to really play an effective role to inform policymakers on and to correct so many of the misleading consultations they were getting from, I don't know the resource of information that was coming from to the military, but I'm 100% sure that they got so many misleading information, especially about the culture of the country they were approaching and how to approach people. And that was another element why things got changed upside down, and the relationship deteriorated between the military and so many communities across Iraq.
Yeah.
So the mission is not easy, but I don't think it's impossible.
I think any mission of even though sometimes I feel like our mission is definitely not easy, but it's not impossible. I like that. I like that saying. Boy, thank you, Khitam, for that
My
description and for that story.
Thank you.
And I asked Larry Jones. You had your hand up. I wanted to make sure to respect if you had a question.
I had a question of both of the interpreters.
Mm-hmm.
When the American forces come into a country, whether it's Korea or Vietnam, or in this case, Iraq, they usually bring with them soldiers who have been trained through the Army Language School, which is I understand it's now a private academic school in California, to assist them with the with interpreting in the country. And Arabic is a very difficult, I would assume is a very difficult language for an adult to begin to learn and then be able to efficiently be able to utilize. Did you have any interactions with military interpreters who are in the Army, were trained in America, and came to your country? What were your impressions of their skill levels?
Thank you, Larry.
I think I met maybe 3 or 4. Their skill level was, I would say, 4 out of 10. Many times they actually just kind of shadow me because it's a learning opportunity for them. There's so much things that goes into the language of Arabic. So yeah, Arabic is one main language, but the average Iraqi, most Iraqis speak in the dialect. So the dialect is different. There's Arab Gulf, there is, what is it called? Levantine, which is Syria, Lebanon, and those areas in Palestine. So, they speak the proper Arabic, and a lot of them, they work in the military intelligence. And even if they were really, really good, they were not enough. It will be a lucky if one brigade has one person, and the scale of, brigades, I don't know, 5,000 soldiers, and they will have 1 or 2. An area when I worked in Ramadi, one platoon, like 20 to 30 soldiers would need 1. So, and a lot of it goes back to, there isn't a lot of Iraqis or Egyptians or, Qatarians in the U.S. military. So that's kind of, I actually met one I met one where he was originally from Iraq, but never met anyone else because so the interpreters that brought by the military, they were so scarce that they were really like insignificant to do anything.
I would add to that, being updated with cultures, characteristics of the community and the society. It's not just about interpreting message, from Arabic to English or from English to Arabic. It's about like really understanding the context, understanding the culture, so interpreter would interpret the situation properly and without, causing problems for both sides. So I would say I would echo Ehab in what he said. I was lucky because I was working in a humanitarian center, and I met two Iraqi interpreters. They're Iraqi American, but they left the country for like 30 years, and the gap of the cultural gap was so huge that they couldn't handle so many sensitive situations. To plus up that, or to multiply that by 100 plus with other nationality. So it's actually not about nationality or the mother tongue. It's about being sensitive to the community you're going to serve. Because by the end of the day, those people were playing the role of mediator more than just interpreter, or at least that the role they should be empowered to play. Not just, it's not just about wording. It's about also trying to use the terms appropriate to the culture that doesn't instigate anger or hatred. When you convey a message from a military to a civilian, but also from American to non-American cultures. I would say that was a huge missing capacity and a huge gap. And that's why many of us are contributing to these events to really try to make an impact and to try to inform policy towards, the type of capacity required to support the military institutions.
Yeah, a really, really sensitive position to be in. Ehab, let's jump to your story. Khitam, thank you again so much. We could spend a month talking to you, I'm sure, that just on the stories that you have from even getting the job to coming to the United States. But if you'd like, please stick around. I know we're going a little bit over time tonight, but I'm not going anywhere. My baby's asleep. So if there's more questions for you, Khitam, we'll get to those later. Ehab, thank you for joining us as well tonight. And I wanted to start with the same question with you is, how did you come to work with the Americans after the invasion?
So my story isn't interesting as Khitam. I really admire her journey and all that good stuff. Like I said, I grew up in a family was not really, it was more like we lived in a countryside most of the time, and our culture is about farming and all that good stuff. So it wasn't that much interesting a story, and also I really like to have someone start the speech in front of me who's actually smarter than me. So, because I'm actually pretty smart, I think. So that's a good thing. So thank you for coming. I actually messaged her through contact connection and asked her if she can join us here. And she actually did the request. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So that's how I want to start. The second is my camera working? It's not working.
We can see you.
Okay. So yeah, mine wasn't like that. So I was young. I was only 16 in 2003. So we lived in Baghdad. We have a farm in Najaf, which is about 110 miles south Baghdad. There's a famous shrine there. There's also, we have, a farm about 60 acres in one of the suburbs. The city suburbs. So we went there to escape the bombardment. We have a house that is kind of like a swahad. It's a very old house built by a great grandfather. The house still somehow like standing. It's made of like dirt bricks. So we went there to escape the bombardment. We knew we were close to the some military bases in Baghdad, so we went there. So first encounter, they before they actually, it was March 7th, 2003. No, actually, I think it was March 27th. Sorry, March 27th. Around that time, the troops took over Najaf, and that's the province that we were in, and they basically assaulted our camp on the farm. When we started our farm, there was about 150 people because like we first arrived, but when the bombardment started, there were like people from far family side. They knew we had farms, so they just kept coming. So we started building tents out of palm trees, leaves, and things like that. Little we know, when the bombardments was so intense, there were people we didn't even know. They just started coming and just camp in our farm. They thought it was just like a, campground. So anyhow, there was all these camps, and we went to a place where the Iraqi army, kind of like a ammo point, I don't know what it was. We took the military tents, we started putting them up. So it looked like a military camp, I would say, assume from looking at it by a helicopter or aircraft. Anyhow, so they assaulted our camp by a military aircraft, helicopters at night, and they laughed because they were just kids and all that good stuff. So they went, and maybe about 25 days after they took over Baghdad, I went back with my family, and I was 16, and my friend Amar was also 16, and we went, we were just young kids, we were just wild, and we were going to watch the bridge, look at them, see how they were damaged. So that was the thing. Going to military bases that were close, we weren't allowed to go in there, and we just look and we see the magnitude of destructions and things like that. Like one time, one of the neighborhoods in Baghdad, there was a military checkpoint. So we went there and stood by them. We talked to them. I spoke little English because I was actually very smart when I was in high school. So they put me in kind of some sort of, what do you call it, gifted kind of school or whatever. So it's focused on French and English and things like that. And the idea was the state, after you graduate, they sponsor you to pursue a degree and, in like Oxford or whatever in Europe. So it didn't happen to me because Saddam was gone. So I lost my scholarship. And at that time, so I spoke pretty fair English. It wasn't as good now. So I spoke to them. I'm always a fan of American cars. I have pictures, posters in my house of all kind of cars, Chevys and things like that. I knew everything about them. I rebuilt my first 350 from scratch since I was 12. So it wasn't like rebuilt engine was just replacing part. It was like the hard part, where you had to get to, get a lathe and put the cylinder and cut it to a bigger true size and all that stuff. So all that stuff I did it myself when I was 12. So I was very interested. I thought everybody had a 79 Malibu or 72 Chevelle. So I went and I talked to the guy, and I was like, where's your car? Do you have a picture of your car? Then the guy showed me Honda Civic, and I was like, what?
Hey, I had a Honda Civic. They're not so bad.
They were Army, but when I later talked to the Marines, they were not really, the Army were not bad because the folks in the Marines were driving Toyota Prius. So, so anyhow, so that's how it started. But then, we were still about a couple hours in the checkpoints, and we end up like talking to the people they're talking to. Then they were like, they're leaving, and they're like, do you want to hop in the Humvee? And I'm like, yeah, this is like a spaceship for me. So I like, well, I'm in. Yeah. So we hopped in the back of the Humvees. They didn't have no doors. They didn't have anything like that. So we went back to the base. They give us some goods for MREs and things like that. When this guy come in there, and he was a sergeant, says, do you want to come work for us? Do you want to come tomorrow? And I was like, my friend was like, we didn't know anything about it. So my friend was like, yo, those guys have a lot of money, like we can definitely make a lot of money out of them. There's no school, there's none of that stuff. So, we don't have to tell our parents or anything. So that's how it really started. So we went back, and my friend kind of wanted to negotiate with them. So he says something like, I'm going to talk to them and ask them how much they give us. And my friend was like, yeah, we don't want hourly. We want something like rate, a daily flat rate. And then the guy goes, how much do you want? And my friend goes like $5 a day. And and the guy was like, that's it? And we're like, yeah. And he goes like, I think you got a job. So that's how it really started. You know, we went back to the military base, was kind of between the Saddam Palace and the Baghdad International Airport. And it was like a military building. I don't know what it was. I don't think it was military. It was like a little bit upscale building, maybe for like intelligence or something like that. So it was kind of partially destroyed from the, you know, the bombardment previously, but then we went there and we really kept going there every day. And that lasted for like maybe 4 or 5 weeks. And later this guy came and says, I have good news and bad news. And I was like, what's the good news? And he goes like, well, the good news, I can hire you. I can't have you working for me making cash. It's against the policy. I can't have you work for me, so I can hire you and make you official. But the bad news is you're only 16, you have to be 18. And I was like, well, I am 18. And he goes, you told me 16. And I was like, can you read my ID? And he goes, no. I was like, well, then I'm 18. So that's how I pretty much told him that. And he just like left and he says, I think you are 18. And, you know, that's how it started. So they took us back where Khitam was previously talking. I went through that gate and they literally took us in there, and there was like written test and there is verbal test. So I failed the written test miserably. I did not know how to, I was kind of learning. I was really good at English, but I wasn't like really good prepared for such an exam when I was young. So I felt, and I was like, I guess I'm not hired. And they're just like, well, you speak good verbally, so we're going to make a waiver for you. And the only reason they did that because of the sergeant kind of insisted he wants to hire us. And he's like, I don't care about his writing skill. I just want him, you know, grammar school. He's fine. I think we could use him. So that's how it really happened. So we went back and they had to relocate to Mosul. So they took us back to another unit in Camp Victory, which is Baghdad International Airport. So that lasted for about 3-4 months. And my family kind of started have some, you know,
reservations
of, like, where do you go? Like, where does this all money come from and all that stuff? I mean, you know, $5 sounds like funny, but Iraq with sanctions since 1991. Like $5, I figured out it was a good price because I was making more than my father does. So it was like, that's when I started. But then when I got hired, I was making way more than that. So it was a lot of money I couldn't really hide, you know. So basically, I
couldn't really put it under the mattress.
Yeah, my father was completely opposite, opposed this, and because he was thinking that I should really pursue my school, and I really thought my school was nothing. It's not going to help me. Because I really, while I was going to school, I was only going to school and I was a good student because I wasn't satisfied my father because he wanted me to go to school and be, you know, engineer or something or a doctor or something. So I really was just doing it for my father. I wanted to go to school, and I think I was a smart student and brilliant student, but the future in Iraq was just miserable in the 90s. Like, I look and I'm like, what is this going to do? Like, what I'm going to be, you know what I mean? So when I got this opportunity, I thought this might lead to something that's better than if I actually go to school. So my father was completely against it. But then in the end, he goes like, how much do you make? Then I told him how much I make. He's like, I think you can skip a couple years of school. That's what he said. But then I went back and I really worked there until the sectarian war started.
And the sectarian wars were really between the Sunni and the Shia?
Yeah, I lived in Shia neighborhood. And the problem is most of the military bases were not in Shia neighborhood. They were all in Sunni neighborhoods because I don't know how it happens, but you know, like, because the military lived on military bases that was established by Saddam regime, and Saddam regime put best of his military or buildings for, you know, his regime, what in really good neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods for Shia populations used to, it's kind of very, you know, it's very old. It's not really a good place where you can put headquarters for military intelligence or so forth.
I know this might dive down a bit of a rabbit hole here, but I do want to ask if you could explain to me the difference between Sunni and Shia.
So the Sunnis and Shia, if you go back in history, it was basically a political disagreement. Back when the Prophet Muhammad died, some people voted for Umar bin Khattab to be successor of the Prophet Muhammad, not Abu Bakr, sorry, which is a friend and of the Prophet Muhammad. But the others were voted for Ali. But whenever they did kind of vote, Abu Bakr kind of won the vote. And so the disagreements and controversy is there's some, what is it called? Gospels and stories says that Muhammad actually designated before he died that Ali should be the successor, the caliphate to lead the Islamic State. But that didn't happen. So that started as a political disagreement, but later it was, you know, over the centuries, you know, 14th century, it became more like a fundamental difference. Even it became a complete different sect, the Sunnis and the Shias. It's much like when Christianity, now you have Orthodox and you know, you have
like Presbyterian, Catholic, and,
yeah, and they actually fought at some point. So during the what is it called, the Crusades?
Yeah.
So everyone thought it was right. So that was a different. I mean, the average Iraqi is not really, you know, is kind of like, oh, you know, like before Saddam time, like there wasn't any like a bigger problem, because the average Iraqi is just born as Shia, you know, born Sunni. They just stuck with it. I don't think any of you chose your religion, so that's how it is. But it happens. The family. Yeah. So yeah, I lived in Shia neighborhood, and for me to go to any military base, I'll have to go through so many Sunni neighborhoods, and that was extremely dangerous. So I was thinking to kind of, I went back and I said, I quit, I resigned. And they said, why? And I went back to the headquarters where they manage all the administrative work for the interpreters, where Khitam and I was hired first in the Green Zone. I said, look, I resigned. Like, and he says, why? I said, I can't get to work and I'm gonna die. And so they told me, you know what? We have a better place for you. And I'm like, where? He said, well, I can take you, I'll send you to Ramadi. And I said, Ramadi is, if I can get 10 miles from where I live to where I work, how do you want me to get 100 miles, which is all Sunni neighborhood as well? And he says, no, you're going to have a helicopter that takes you back and forth. I'm like, I was young and I was like, are you serious? And he goes like, yeah. I'm like, I'm not kidding you. And I was like, helicopter? He's like, yeah. And I was like, that's great, man. I got it. Sign me in. So
an upgrade from a Honda Civic, right?
Yeah, no, I've like never been in a helicopter. I've seen helicopters and I thought they were cool. So I went actually, I went back, told Omar. Omar was working with me as well. So we both went. So Omar went to Fallujah. I went to Ramadi. And I went back home really quick and I told my parents that I'm going away. I'm not going to come every day. I'm going to be maybe every couple months or so. So I went and I took the helicopter. It was great. I felt like I was in Black Hawk movie when it was landed here. Like I can feel the, what is it called? You know, when you go to a roller coaster,
exhilaration.
No, the feeling, the thrill. I felt the thrill. I felt the thrill, like when it was hovering. I was like, "This is for me." These guys, and they just opened the door for me. Boy, I felt like I was hero and everything. So I went, got in the helicopter, but then they landed me in Camp Ramadi. In the first 3 minutes I'm there, I kind of realized why they got me in a helicopter, because Ramadi was completely different than any military base in Baghdad I saw. It was completely dark. There was no lights anywhere. I mean, it was so dark in the desert that if you put your finger, you can't, like, in front of you, you won't see it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, unless if the moon is not like a half moon or something, you know, you can't. It's really dark.
Yeah.
But then this guy just loaded my luggage, and I'm like, what is this luxury treatment? Like, this guy's like loading my duffel bags and everything. So he's like, oh, you're the interpreter. I'm waiting for you with that truck. But then I look around, the helicopter landed in like the middle of nowhere. There wasn't any like a place for it. It was like just in the desert and landed. And this guy, it was only a guy waiting for me, two guys with a truck. So they took me back.
Did you feel a little like James Bond or like the Hollywood movies you were talking about? Was there something like you felt like you were in an action movie?
That's what, like, this is what really drove me. Like, I really, like, whatever I made, I just gave it to my parents. I really didn't care about the money.
Okay.
So I gave it to my parents. I gave it to, you know, people who needed it, even though I made so much money back then. So it wasn't, for me, it wasn't about the money. It was first the thrill, but then, you know, I got to the military base. It was so dark, I couldn't see. The next day in the morning, they took me in. They showed me around. Then I was walking. They said, you know, here's where you're going to eat the military chow. They gave me directions. So I went. And while I was there was military tents. So I was walking and I heard people speaking in Iraqi. And I was like, what is this? So I opened the tent and looked, and I found about 10 guys. They were all interpreters. They were all young as well. And I'm like, are you guys interpreters? They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh, I'm new here too. They're like, no, we're not new. We're just the guys who, we quit. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you quit? Are you serious? And he's like, they're like, yeah. And so apparently what they do is they will get hired, but then the first day they get in there, they resign. And when they resign, it takes like, I don't know, a month or 2 months of processing. Then they get like salary for a month while they're not doing anything. Then they go back home. Then 2 weeks later, they will like apply again and they get accepted and do it all over again. So they were like, where do they quit? And I was like, why? I mean, it's nice. It's good money and all that stuff. And they're like, yeah. Wait until you go outside and see. And I was like, okay. So actually I went and ate my lunch, and I was, you know, assigned to a unit from Pennsylvania National Guard. So I went, first day I actually went outside in a patrol. And while I was there in the military base, there was sirens going on in 2006, like every couple hours. There were Katyusha missiles and all kind of rockets, 120 millimeters, mortar rounds, 80 millimeters, and all that stuff. And the whole time you're there, it's just like the shooting and bombardments just outside the base. They're too far. So I was kind of interested trying to figure out what's going on. So I went my first patrol, and we were actually heavily attacked. And I came back, and I was like, whoa, that was great. And so the first sergeant, he was like, you're joking? And I'm like, no, I think that was awesome. So he was surprised because he said some people had actually quit and the first time they went outside. But anyhow, that's how I started. I spent most of my time in Camp Ramadi up until 2007.
Taking a helicopter to work every day.
Yeah, literally, yeah. Not every day. Okay. So when I was there, I would go back every 45 days. I'll go for like 3-4 days.
Okay.
But it's like awesome. I'll make a phone call, and they will tell me what time to stand there. So I'll stand and get my luggage, and the helicopter will pick me up and take me to Baghdad, to Green Zone. Then I get a cab and go home. Then do the same thing before I get back. But the problem is I kind of knew why they have a special treatment. There was literally no interpreters. Like I was working there like with people I don't know. Like it's not like one unit that I was assigned to. There were like, I would sleep like most of my time in the trucks, in the Humvees, in the tank. It was so much work. There was there was 7,000 troops in Camp Ramadi. There was only about like 20. I mean, like you can imagine, and that's why like they like one time, like when I was there was no rules, there was no anything for interpreters. Like when I worked in Baghdad, interpreters were not allowed to carry even like a knife or cell phone. Like when I was in Camp Ramadi, like I was the first guy I met who was an interpreter. He had a hand grenade in his hand, and he was like playing with it. And I was like, "What are you doing? You're allowed to do this?" And he's like, "Yeah, man. Like you can have guns here and do all kinds of stuff." And I'm like, well, "Why is that?" He said, "Good. There's not many interpreters, so they don't care what you do. They don't want to piss you off." So when I went there, it was extensive actually work. The average soldier would go maybe 1 or 2 patrols a day. I was going 24/7 with me and my friends. It was, but as soon as I started to go outside, I started getting more interested not in the thrill. It wasn't about the thrill anymore. It was really about the help. Like the people of Ramadi was brutally, like they were in between two hammers, if you could say. The coalition forces and the terrorists will fight all day long, and these people just caught in the middle. They're all Sunnis. If they go to the south, they would kill them. It was a sectarian war. So for me, I started changing. Every time I want to quit, and it got dangerous and dangerous. And I was like, look, like if I quit, like who's gonna do it? Like if everybody's just quit, like who's gonna do this? Who's gonna help to stabilize the security and all that good stuff. So that's what it started. Then I started to become more mature. All these thoughts about being hero and all that stuff just went away. The action, the stuff that I saw was very brutal for my age. It actually made me more mature later on. But then everything changed when David Petraeus came. David Petraeus was a guy who really wanted to fix what Paul Bremer did, is get that gap in the gap that created between the U.S. military and the people. He really had an idea how to fix it, and he came to Camp Ramadi, and he talked to the officers there and talked to us, and I had knowledge about the tribes. Being in the country and my family, I spent most of my time in a tribal kind of culture. And I'm also kind of like mature for my age. So they had this, what's called the Awakening the Son of Iraq militias that actually eventually like won the war against Al-Qaeda in Al-Anbar province with the help of the Americans. They wanted us, they kicked this program. They wanted to make peace talk with the tribes, and it was all thing going like that. Then they listed who are the people that gonna carry this mission. And I looked at the board, my name was in there, and I'm like, what? That's my name right there. And the colonel that looked at me and said, yep, that is your name. You're gonna be the one who's helping us talk to the tribes. I actually was surprised because they had people in the brigade that came from the United States. They have PhDs in social science, and they were Arabic originally. They were from one of them was Iraqi, the other one was Moroccan and Jordanian. They were getting paid ridiculously, like $250,000 a year salary. Can
I insert just one little thing here, Ehab? I didn't want to interrupt you, but Petraeus, and I think Todd would like this. Petraeus was a historian and an academic, as well as a military combat leader. And as a combat leader, he was trained in special forces, which means you know the language, you know the culture, you know the religion, and you know combat arms, but you're also skilled in history. And these are the guys, these are the American leaders that are most potent in helping people in a country re-secure. And I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and actually I completely agree with you. So they started the awakening and basically the work with the tribes, the surge, if you guys remember that. in Al-Anbar. And Al-Anbar it has many sections. So Anbar in the land size is like third of the country, the third square meters or footage of the whole country. So it's a very big province, and there are 18 provinces. Al-Anbar is only one of them, is like third of all the country, and had a lot of tribes in it, and has different areas. It has Fallujah, if you guys all heard. It has Ramadi, it has Hit, Al-Assad, all these areas that in Ramadi. And when Petraeus came in and he spoke to the military officer, I mean, you can feel the tension. Many military officers, they were not want to agree with him. They wanted to get the iron fist. They wanted to, you all heard like, what's his name? Mattis says, there was rumors in Iraq, says, if you go to meeting, have a plan to kill everyone inside. That's how he ran he was, I think, in Fallujah at some point, but that's how that's how the military was. And I actually felt that when I was there. So I did, and when David Petraeus came in and it came his idea, it felt like this is exactly what I was talking about. Like it resonated with me, and I was like, this is great. And there was one guy behind, his name, Michael Silverman. He's a lieutenant colonel. He was the commander of 369 Armor Battalion. So Michael was, he spent many years in the CIA. Then he worked as advisor for the Minister of Defense in Saudi Arabia for about 5 years in his life while he's in military. He spoke a little bit Arabic, and he's a historian as well. So he was full throttle for David Petraeus' idea. He actually, I think he had thought about it himself, because he was one of the officers that I kind of felt that he resonated with me and David Petraeus. And the minute I saw him, and immediately spoke, and he was very interested of hearing from me. I did not know about the surge at that time back. And so he sat with me and we talked, and he talked about the tribes and history, like I was really, he blew my mind how much knowledge he had. He was completely different than any military officer. That he was very academic. He's a lawyer. He has a degree in political science. He has I think, PhD in international law or something. So he knew, and he spent his life in the Middle East being a CIA agent for a while. Then, he has a very broad spectrum of background. So I talked to him, and he really liked me, and he knew what was my idea. So whenever they kicked this program, they put my name in there, and I was like, well, what about these guys? I mean, they had people that were older than me. They have much more education. They brought in for the surge, and they just like, Silverman was like, I know what you think. I don't want interpreter. I want someone to help me, be advisor. And one time, David Petraeus was asked about the role of interpreters. He never said. He said, he just looked and says, yeah, I don't think the interpreter is the right title. I think it was not like that. They were not. That's his word. He said, if I would say, it's more like advisor, and that's on that topic he spoke about what the role he had a kind of like a panel interview.
Yeah.
And he in front of many audience, and they spoke about the topic of interpreters. So he spoke about this, but so we started first Al Jazeera Council, and within literally, I would say 15 months, we were able to reconcile 17 tribes in an area that had 200,000 people. The attacks, the metrics of attack dropped from 80 a week, just in Ramadi, not the whole province, in just the city, from 80 a week until like one, maybe every 2 weeks.
Sorry, Ehab, if I may add, So you guys were doing the job in Ramadi, and being the head of the detention center, I was actually providing oversight for the release of the prisoners under that tribal agreement. It was conditional release because they had to go through rehab under the supervision of the tribal sheikhs, the tribal leader, before they get reintegrated to the society. And conditional in case they got rearrested, then the tribal leader will be in a prison as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And the reason we did this, and it's a good that you remind me of this, there were so many people wrongfully locked away. Like there are so many. Like I saw this firsthand. I actually, many of the missions, I saved people from getting detained because I really argued the evidence. I was told one time by one of friends, he says, hey, look, if you don't shut your mouth, these Americans just get put you in lock and put you in Buka in the detention center. Why you keep arguing with them? And I said, I can't. This is my principles. I really can't just, it's not me. If something I don't think is right, at least I try. And if it doesn't happen, at least I tried. So, so many times, and, we spoke and we transferred the message for the, message of the tribes and communities to the Americans. And from that, we were able to make peace in Al-Anbar province. The military intelligence in 2006, Marine military intelligence, wrote a report, which it's on WikiLeaks. It says, we literally have no control of the province. It was designated the most dangerous zone on the planet. It was Al-Anbar. And within turnaround of 15 months, we were able to reconcile the tribes, rebuilt, opened the school, hospitals. We did the training, like in my area alone, I was supervising training of 3,500 policemen. They were all from the tribes. Some of them, we had programs to release those that, were locked for no reason other than just bad intel. Or we have programs that for those who did, but not very, they have, like when you make deals like that, you have to sacrifice. So like, for example, someone who maybe helped the terrorist by, watching or giving them information, those were able to release, but definitely not like the leaders or anything like that. Or those that actually, or those who conducted harms on the Iraqis, they were turned into the police to get fair, trial. Because at that time, until 2007, there was no police stations in Ramadi. There was nothing like that. So even if you know who the terrorist is who killed your son, you really can't do anything about it. The Americans didn't care. They were just fighting whoever, was shooting at them. They can't do the police work. They're not equipped to do that. They're not trained. It's not their job. They're not police of that country. So I would assume it's very difficult. So at that time, we did reconciling tribes. We were able to bring down the attacks, and we ultimately defeated Al-Qaeda in Iraq. In Iraq today, there's no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Yeah, there's ISIS and things like that emerged later, but the ISIS does not really carry the fundamental, at least in the political tensions as Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was hard, so wanted to, attack America and its allies, but ISIS really wasn't that until when they started their bombing campaign. That's when they started bombing in Europe just as a retaliation. But I think it's completely different organization. Although some of its leaders were kind of the rookies in Al-Qaeda, but it's different. I would say that Al-Qaeda was defeated in Iraq, and because of really our work in General David Petraeus' principle, and the surge actually did work.
Wow. So, well, I want to thank you, Ehab. that's an incredible story for both of you. Just like this chance meeting, and then where it's come since then. I want to open it up to any questions that anybody has here with the last couple minutes, and any thoughts that anybody has for our two guests tonight. I thank you both for sharing what you've gone through. And I know that, boy, I wrote down probably like 50 questions here, but as is, you start into a story and stories this well told, you just kind of let them ride and you follow. But yeah, George, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say, I would think any American military veteran of a war has concern about the future of the country he participated in military action in, with whatever the hopes and dreams or goals of that military action was in that country. Because I certainly still have an affinity with Vietnam and its future and its people. And I'm sure there are guys who served in Iraq, in the Middle East generally. So is there anything you guys can say about, and I'm talking about Ihar and Khitam, to American veterans about what is happening today in Iraq that would make their service worthwhile for a country that's still struggling with its future? I know that's a complex question, but if you understand the human value of that is,
it's not just the veterans, it's ours as well.
I know. I'm not making it one or the other. I'm just saying that you're in a group here of Veterans Breakfast Club, and they served in countless different American wars. And you guys are from countries that have had strife within your own countries. And I'm just wondering what you think of the future of Iraq is, that somehow it's going to come out to a positive end. I know it's a big question.
Do you want to go Khitam or?
Either one.
Yeah, thank you, Ehab. I don't think it falls under the veterans and the military, the U.S. military, or the DoD only anymore.
Right.
I think it's a heavy lift for the current U.S. administration. But what I would say, the consequences on the U.S. veteran and the entire military structure, the U.S. military structure, is deep. The situation in Iraq, it has a long-standing and will have long-standing legacy under the DoD. It's hard to deny the positive role, especially for the veterans or the U.S. military and the U.S. DoD's institutions in supporting Iraq defeating ISIS within I would say no time, in comparison to if we're looking at what ISIS is as a group or as a visionary let's say entity. It's hard to skip that part. But it's kind of like, for me, the situation and the relationship between Iraq and the U.S. is fluctuating between corrections by the military and then, fell down by the administration, and then fixing by the administration, and then, fell down by or failure by some military interventions. I think, for me, that's an indicator that it's inevitable. The conflict is always inevitable, even within the U.S. structures. But I think it's hard and useless not to acknowledge that conflict between the political administration and structures within the U.S. as well as the DOD and the military structure within the U.S. I think if there is one lesson we should learn from the Iraqi invasion, Iraqi American restructuring of relationships, Iraqi American allies. As you see, it's multi iterations of the development of the relationship. I don't think we could go back to where we, I think to late 2003 when Bremer came in and messed up everything, or whatever, or whoever used the Bremer for that position. And it's hard for the U.S. Political and military structure not to come together to some sort of reconciliation. It would be super hard to maintain the U.S. image as well as to keep up all the investment and the gains that being put into a place for fixing and restructuring a long-term strategy. I would say that's my my initial reaction to your question.
No follow-ups, George.
So,
No, go ahead.
no, George, this is very tough question, and most people really struggle to answer it. But here's what I can tell you is,
give me your truth.
That particular war is very controversial, and as long time goes, it'll become more controversial because they found out actually Iraq has nothing to do with 9/11. That's one thing.
Right.
They never really had weapons of mass destruction. But Saddam was removed. Was that a good choice? Yeah. Does worth the price? Not sure. So that's really the answer.
Yeah.
Now,
that's a good answer.
What's going on in Iraq? Yeah. Is it
that's
gonna?
A good answer.
I mean, it is. I'm going to be very honest with you.
Yeah, that's an honest answer.
What I keep telling myself, that the person who hung the veterans, this message to the veterans, the veterans who fought in Iraq, particularly in Iraq and Afghanistan, you can take the pride and say, hey, I fought Al-Qaeda, we killed Osama bin Laden, great. But if you felt that you went to war, it has worth a price, here's what I want you to think. You think whatever you did, what was your intention initially? That's what you think. So do I feel good about the invasion of Iraq? I really am not sure. Do I feel bad? Yeah, sometimes I feel bad seeing Iraq is struggling. But do I regret? I don't think I do because there are a lot of things that my intentions were clear. I wanted to help. My intentions weren't the intentions of Paul Bremer or George Bush or whoever in the CIA told them about the lies. I really don't know. Those are not my intentions. My intentions were, I was told to do, I thought I was doing right, and I did right. I was trying to help people, whether they're Iraqis, whether they were Americans, because for me, the mission wasn't really about money anymore. It wasn't about the thrill like I thought it was. I really thought I was really doing something that, can change. And things happen, mistakes happen. So don't be hung on the hook and trying to blame yourself. And really go back to yourself and see what you did, what were your intention, and really just put your faith in it. And that's what it is. That's what I can tell you.
Well,
thank you, Ehab.
One thing I just wanted to say, Ehab, is you are echoing something that Vietnam veterans have done. We went into a war that we had good intentions, and we worked at it and struggled and fought it and suffered from it. And we found later, and we grew up and we found out it was quite different than we really had thought it was.
Yeah. And
so there's a great deal of lesson learning from America and from other countries that we have fought in. And I would, if I were an Iraqi today, I would be in your position of feeling it's still a struggle that may not have gone a good course, but the responsibility is going to fall on you and your generation and your families and your culture to solve it eventually.
So I feel that, I know Iraq is struggling, and security and corruption, and stunk in the international kind of atmosphere, if I can put that expression. But here's what I can tell you, though. I can see them. I'm very optimistic about the future of Iraq, because the new generation, the early 2000s and 90s, are completely, I see different boys, different girls. They completely, like, before it was okay for a political, I'll just give you an example, maybe 5, 6, 10 years ago, it was very okay and embraced. A politician will come up and speak sectarian and all that stuff. Now, if one said something, it almost like, like the women movement here, they will go viral at the speed of light. Everybody was just going to make fun of them on the social media. They were like, he's sectarian. Almost like someone says some racist, racist things in public, and people, how people react to that. They will go viral if they get, people will get fired of their job, or people will hate them, just like them. So the new generation is like that. I've actually seen them in younger folks.
Yep.
That's, I'm thinking they're the one, give them maybe 5, 10, 20 years at the most. They will definitely do that change. That
yes,
I would think that they will really do. Now they are young boys and girls that are protesting in every city in Iraq. They protested, demand for freedom, for a big sanction on corruptions and things like that. So people want better life. They want a better education. I see a doctor was in a protest, has his own uniform, and he had a sign, and he was screaming and saying, "I'm a doctor. I get paid this much." Doctors get paid good in Iraq. He says, "Hey, I'm a doctor. I get that much paid. And he was screaming it too. I want a country." What does that mean? He said, "I'm not here saying I'm a jobless or anything like that. I'm a doctor. I have money. I make good money. I just want a good country." So that type of mentality, it's very rising. People are, young folks are engaging. And hopefully maybe, 10, 15 years from now on, when, because Vietnam is a good country now. It didn't get good country within 5, 10 years.
No.
It took them so long, about 40 years to get to where they are. And I'm pretty sure when it started, it was communist and all that stuff whenever the North won and all that good stuff. So Iraq will get there eventually. And because if you look really on the demographics of Iraq, it has a lot of potential.
Yes.
The writings, the things that it's all created there. The average IQ for Iraqis.
Do you think that women are going to be a part of this too?
I think women are part of Iraq too. Yeah, they're right now. Yeah, maybe I would say back in the 80s, they had more kind of contribution, and kind of in the 90s kind of stalled. But now it's
picking up.
It's going there. So the generations that my generation and younger are really getting there. So, Iraq really, for Iraq could be a good example for women contribution as a Middle Eastern country, which a lot of Americans don't know that. Like the first driver license issued in the Middle East to women was in Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean,
the first judge actually in the Middle East was Iraqi.
Right.
And if you allow me, I just wanted to reflect on what you just said, and I can't agree with you more. I think another lesson learned from the Iraqi situation is, where are we putting our bets? I think people are gambling still around the political atmosphere or sphere. It's a loose game. I assure you, it's a loose game. As Ehab expressed, I think the Iraqi generation are getting out of the movie made and the Hollywood made and the dictatorship bubble made and stepping into reality and resisting, and they're not giving this away. And one indicator to that maturity, or I would say going back to the reality of Iraqis after being misled or caged for 35 years. One indicator is that if you trace the political messages in Iraq, it actually follows what people are saying, what the public are saying. However, it's still a weak game because the public, the citizens, are pointing out whether these messages are the fake scenario that they're trying to make people hear what they want to be heard, and that's where I would say it's a lose some sort of gambling game, because people are not there to hear. People are there and they're losing their life on daily basis to gain, and these are different things. People are there for practical achievements, for practical change. And if you go now in the street and ask Iraqis what do they think about the American society, they have so many answers. They would be, I'm almost sure, like they will say, like, are you asking about the American administration or you're asking about the American people? Because these are two different stories. We've been in that scenario for quite some times, and we got off the dictatorship scenario to sectarian scenario, so we know the game. We're the one who gonna pay the dinner and lunch by the end of the day. So the perception, I can't say changed, but it went back to the reality of the Iraqi people. There is very limited space for misleading for the Iraqi community, and it's a loose game. The only reality now is that the Iraqi people are willing to recontrol the situation and reestablish strategic relationships with everyone. We never, as Iraqi, we never approve any war we've been through, not with any country. And I don't think there will be a time where if there will be an honest public poll, Iraqis will always stand against war, because I believe the Iraqi people have paid costly bills across these wars. And I don't think, I mean, it's a legit question to ask about Iraqi women, but they never lost their contribution. They've been always in a vulnerable space, especially with the political reconstruction of quota and whatever, all these categorization, political categorizations and frames. However, the role of the Iraqi women never changed. And back to Ehab's point, the first license, the first judge, the list goes on. Ehab, to you.
So
Thank you both. George, we're gonna.
I think we've got to cut it off. We set a record, a BBC record for the longest program. 2 hours, 16 minutes.
It's always good.
Thank you, Ehab. Thank you, Khitam. We're breaking records tonight.
We need to continue the conversation, I think, another night.
We do, definitely.
And I know that Khitam and Ehab are going to be part of a scuttlebutt coming up, right?
I would love to have you both onto the podcast to talk. We'll continue this into the podcast to talk about interpreters as well on there. It's a different audience and a different way that we can dive into some other things.
John DeLallo, do you have something you want to close us out with?
John?
I have it's actually a very complex question. But,
I'm going to fall asleep in my microphone.
It's a fast question, but it's very complex. Do Khitam and Ehab see a movement away from tribalism and towards nationalism in Iraq, and I'm thinking back, from 1920 something on forward, when the artificial borders were established. And again, have we moved from tribalism to a cohesive nationalism in Iraq?
I think I maybe failed to mention that. So all the new generation that I mentioned earlier, those are young folks that actually you can see that the nationalism kind of it represents them more than they tribal. Like it lost their identity of sectarian or the tribalism. Like I said, there was two parties, Sunnis and Shia. Literally 5-10 years ago, whenever a politics says something about the other, the Shia said something about the Sunni, like terribly, like it would say something like, if I had my hand, I would kill them all or something. They get braced. Like people are like, yeah, this guy's awesome. But now it's like if someone says that, he gets absolutely humiliated by the young folks. He wouldn't be able to walk in the street. People wouldn't even walk in restaurants or something like that. It's absolutely completely different generation. People are losing their, I don't think tribalism it's going to be lost, but for a long time. But it become because it's part of the last name is the title. So my last name is actually not, it's a tribal name. So it's so I think that will stay alive. But even though Iraq tribalism system is not really a bad thing, and I mean we can go deep in details. The tribals in Iraq isn't something where people kill each other and all that stuff. No, it's not like that. In the Arab world, it's completely different. It's almost like the samurai, its owner, its values, and things like that.
Thank you.
You have the final word.
Thank you for this question. I would say tribalism being invested in when there was, especially to respond to the gap of the state in Iraq, and invested in wrongly. However, tribalism, where Iraq is not living the 20s anymore. Tribalism it doesn't have the same weight, even when they were at the peak time of their authority in certain areas of Iraq, because there were discrimination by the government and so on and so forth, and the position against the US. I would give you two indicators, like Iraq is a nationalism society, is the defeat of Al-Qaeda and the defeat of ISIS within a short amount of time. Trust me, no matter what and how the military investment will be put together and the military operations, it will go on and on. And the example for that is clearly Afghanistan. But it's different in Iraq, because the society in Iraq are mainly nationalists. They belong to Iraq as a united country. I also assure you, if there is a third version of insurgent and extremism will rise in Iraq, it will have the same destiny as Al-Qaeda and ISIS, I assure you. And it's not just about the new generation. I might disagree a bit with Ehab on this. It's actually the different generations. Even those who went with the tribes for quite some time, fear will drive you. Fear always is an active GPS when your sense of security and safety is being jeopardized or compromised. That doesn't mean Iraq is run by the tribal system. However, it's a system to be acknowledged and respected, to be respected in Iraq, and we just can't underestimate the tribal structure. And a good example of that is the rise of ISIL and how they navigate their way through the tribal system. But I assure you, Iraq is nationalist to the bone.
Thank you so much, Khitam, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This has been incredibly educational. I challenge Todd to break my Generation 9/11 record for longest program ever. And I think if the only thing I could ask of Todd is that I want a helicopter to get to work every day. it's been a pleasure and an honor, Khitam, Ehab. I hope to have you both on again, either here or on the Scuttlebutt to talk more. Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's almost lunchtime for Ashley.
I know.
Let me just thank Ehab for introducing me to the program. It wouldn't happen without him connecting me with you guys. So thank you so much, Ehab.
Thank you.
Hey, if you
Thank
have
you,
LinkedIn, if you have LinkedIn profile, please
Sure.
endorse my
I will.
public speaking or skills or whatever if you want to do
Yeah.
that. So look
I
me
will
up.
do
Ehab
that. I
Al-Akrawi.
will absolutely do that.
Yeah.
Endorsing now. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.